Hey guys, xin chào các bạn. Hola amigos y amigas. In today's video, I'm going to explain step by step on how to solve Eloquent JavaScript's Chapter 2 Programming Structure, Exercise 3 Chessboard. So, viewer discretion, there are various ways that you can solve a coding problem. However, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to cover the ones that I found were easy to read, easy to follow, and easy to understand. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the ones that I cover will be the most sophisticated solutions, aka the ones that the computer would find most efficient. So for the problem, we want to output the following result. We want to create an 8x8 grid, so 8 columns across and 8 rows top to bottom. And for each row and column, we want to alternate between space and a hashtag. So let's start with our first solution, the one provided by the textbook. So / method 1 for loop within a for loop. So I'm going to write out the code first, and then we can break it down and explain line by line of the code afterwards. So let size equals to 8, semicolon, let board equals to quotation, quotation, semicolon, 4 bracket, let y equals to 0, semicolon, y is less than our variable size, semicolon, y plus plus, bracket, and then array bracket, 4, let x equals to 0, semicolon, x is less than size, semicolon, x plus plus, and then start another array bracket if double bracket x plus y, and then remainder operator 2 is equal to 0, and then start another array bracket. Board plus equals to space, or quotation, space, quotation, semicolon, and then closing. So we'll use else, and then start another array bracket. Board plus equals to quotation, hashtag, quotation, semicolon, and then board plus equals to quotation, backslash, n, and then semicolon. And then console.log board, semicolon. Okay, cool. We will break down the code now. So below the code, I'll just create a comment section. So /* and then close it with */. I'm just going to take the code that we just wrote, copy it, Control-C, and then paste it, Control-V, and then down here we can break it line by line without actually affecting the code. So what we did first is we set the variables. So our variables is called size and board, and so the size variable sets a limit for iterations to be used in our loop, and then our board variable sets a blank placeholder to be filled with our if statements down here. So the first for loop the one that uses the y. This one, y represents the vertical axis, aka the rows. This creates the loop for the rows. And then our next line, the one that has x, x represents the horizontal axis, aka the columns. This creates the loop for the columns. So note that this is a for loop within another for loop. So our first for loop was up here. This one is embedded within that for loop. So it's loopception. Okay, the for loop of x, whoops. So this for loop of x must complete its entire run from 0 to 8 before the loop of y can start its next loop, where y plus plus. So this embedded for loop will complete it in its entire sequence before this first for loop will go on to its next iteration. The next line, so if x plus y remainder operator of 2 is equal to 0, then we will execute board plus equals to quotation space quotation. So for this one, when we set x plus y, every second number will be divisible by 2. Therefore, every second character will execute the quotation space character, and each new line will alternate between an even and odd number. Board plus equals to quotation is the same as writing it as board equals to board plus quotation space quotation. So we adjusted our variable to add quotation space to it. So the syntax for our if statement is the condition, and then if this condition is met, then the following code will be executed, which is this code here. This refers back to our variable board up here. So up here we set board as blank. So if this condition is met, then our variable board will then have or grasp at this string, quotation space quotation. And then later I'll also show you the break. Like, so this line, these lines here can be slightly confusing. So later in the video I will show you guys on Excel what it looks like. Our next line is else, array bracket board plus equals to quotation hashtag quotation semicolon. This one still belongs to our if statement up here. So if the condition is not met up here, and if this is not executed, then else means perform this action if the action up here is not performed. So this is for every other number not divisible by 2, quotation, hashtag quotation will be executed. Moving on to our next line, board plus equals to quotation backslash and quotation semicolon. So backdash n creates a new line. Board plus equals to quotation backdash and quotation is the same as writing it as board equals to board plus quotation backdash and quotation. This statement is attached to it's attached to this one. It's attached to the for statement with a y. So once the entire x sequence, or the for loop for the x sequence is completed, the n, this one will execute along with each of the y iterations. This statement is attached to the for loop that contains the y. Therefore, it ensures that the loop of x runs 8 iterations, aka 8 characters across, before breaking into a new line. And then the last line, console.log board, this is just executing our final output of our variable board up here. So initially we set up board as just like a blank placeholder. So after it runs all these adjustments, when we summon board again at the very bottom, it will produce this chessboard looking pattern. NANI? The solution provided from the textbook can be kind of confusing to wrap your mind around. So I use Excel to break down each part of the code to show what's going on. So up here we have our original code solution, and then down here are columns to show what each part of the code does. So in column B we have, column B represents our y iteration, which is our for loop up here, which contains the y. Column C is our x iteration, which relates to the second for loop within the first for loop here. And then our D column shows the starting y value for each iteration. Column E represents the starting x value for each iteration. Column F represents the condition for the second for loop, for the embedded for loop. So this part here, the second part of the syntax, x is less than size, where size is has a value of 8, where we set the variable to a value of 8 up here. So column G then represents x plus y, which is this part of the if statement here. And then column H is it divisible by 2 with a remainder of 0. So if the result of x plus y is in fact divisible by 2 with a remainder of 0, the result here would be a whole number, a whole integer. So in this cell, I essentially just showed that x plus y divided by 2. And if this condition is met, then we will execute so that our variable board, which is up here, it will add quotation space quotation, or it will execute space. And if it does execute, then it will ignore the second segment, which is else board plus equals to quotation hashtag quotation. So let's run through a couple of lines to show what the code does. So starting with the first line, we have the first iteration of y. And because we have a for loop within another for loop, so our for loop that contains the y has an embedded for loop that contains an x. The for loop that contains the x will complete its entire sequence, so it will run through all the iterations until this condition is satisfied, where x is less than 8. So it will run from 0 all the way to 7, and then it will stop when x becomes 8. So here I showed that for the first iteration of y, it will contain the full sequence of the x iteration. So x must complete its entire sequence before y can jump onto its next iteration, because this x loop is contained within the while loop. So let's go back to the line. So the first iteration of y, first iteration of y and the first iteration of x, the starting value of y is 0, because up here we set let y equals to 0. So it starts with the value of 0. And then the starting x for the first line is also 0, because up here we set our starting value let x equals to 0. So because the x is less than 8, so column F is our condition, which is right here. X is less than size, where size is set to a value of 8 up here. So because the value of x, which is 0, is less than 8, then yes, we will continue looping, meaning that we will keep running these iterations down here. And then in column G, x plus y is this part of the code here, where you have the starting value of y here of 0 plus the starting value of x 0 here. So 0 plus 0 equals to 0, and then that remainder operator 2 equals to 0 is this part of the code here. And because 0 divided by 0 is undefined, where JavaScript reads it as 0, then yeah, it does meet this condition, and therefore it executes in the first segment. It will execute the space, which is this part of the code here. So because this condition here is met, this if condition is met, we will execute this. And because we executed the first segment, we essentially skip over the else. We don't need to look at this part of the code. And then in our second line, so the second iteration of x, so y is still 0, because as I was saying before, this entire segment is representing the first iteration of y, and within y, x must complete its entire sequence, because the x loop is contained within the y loop. So in the second iteration of x, y is still the value of 0, and then our x will increase by 1, because up here in our code it says that at the end of each iteration x will increase by 1, x plus plus. So because x is still less than 8, then yes, we will continue looping. And then x plus y, so 0 plus 1 equals to 1. 1 divisible by 2 is not equal to 0. Therefore, we will skip. We will not execute this first segment where it's spaced. And then we will go to else, which is this part of the code here. So because this condition is not met, we will not execute this part of the code, we will use the else and execute this part, which is represented here. So we will execute the hashtag. And so this code, so the process, the same process continues until the very end, where x increases to 8, and because 8 is no longer less than 8, then we will stop the loop here. And once we stop the loop here, the entire sequence of x is completed. Therefore, this board plus equals to quotation backdash n quotation will execute, because x, this is completed. This entire sequence is completed. Now we will execute a new line. So this backdash board plus equals to quotation backdash n quotation relates to our for loop that contains the y. So to read this is essentially in the first iteration of y, we created one line with 8 characters. So starting with space. So in the very first line, it starts with space, hashtag, space, hashtag, space, hashtag, space, hashtag, and there's 8 of them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then once the entire for loop for x is completed, it stops the loop, and then it executes the new line. So the very first line will look like that. So space hashtag, space hashtag, space hashtag, space hashtag, space hashtag, etc. And then now that the first iteration of y is complete, we can move on to the second iteration. So in the second iteration of y, y will then now increase by 1, because in our original code, we have, at the end of the y iteration, we have y++. So y will increase by 1. So from 0 up here, we will now increase to 1. And similar to above, it will stay at 1 until all iterations of x are completed. So as you can see here, it remains 1, while in column E, the x will increase by 1. So because x is 0, it's less than 8, then yes, we will continue looping. X plus y just shows 1 plus 0 equals to 1, and because 1 divisible by 2 is not equal to 0, then we will not execute the first segment, and we will go to else and execute the hashtag. And then moving on to the second line, the starting y is still 1, and then now x will increase by 1 because of x++, the part of the code here. So now 1 is less than 8, then yes, we will continue looping. And now we have 1 plus 1 equals to 2, and because 2 divisible by 2 has a remainder of 0 because there's no leftovers, then we will execute the space because the condition is met. And then because the first segment is met, it will not execute the second segment, which is else. So this pattern, or this process, continues until the very end, where x increases to 8, and because 8 is no longer less than 8, the loop will stop here. And because the entire sequence of x is completed, this entire sequence here, now it will execute board plus equals to quotation backdash n quotation, which is a new line. So similar to above, there will be 8 characters. So it starts with hashtag. So hashtag space hashtag space hashtag space hashtag space. So there's 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then so that will represent the second line. So there will be 8 characters for the second line. And so this process will continue on until the y iterations hits 8, it hits 8 and it stops looping. So it'll create 8 rows of 8 characters of these alternating space and hashtags, because in our outer or our first for loop that contains the y, we had set the condition where the y iterations is less than size, where our size value is 8. So it'll keep running until our y number is no longer less than 8. And because our starting y iteration, every second number will be divisible by 2, this will help create the alternating starting value. So as you can see here, where the y value was 0, we start with space, and then because now in the second iteration y had increased by 1, now 1 will start with hashtag because it is not divisible by 2. So let's jump into our second method, or the second solution, where we set up the strings as variables, and then we utilize the .repeat function to create the pattern with 8 characters across and 8 rows going from top to bottom. / method 2. So I'll first write out the code, and then we can break down and explain the code afterwards. So method 2, set pattern strings as variables, and then period repeat. Let space hashtag equals to quotation space hashtag, and then semicolon. Let hashtag space equals to quotation hashtag space quotation, and then close with semicolon. For let I equals to 0, semicolon, I is less than 8, semicolon, I plus plus, close a bracket, and then start array bracket. If I remainder operator 2 strictly equals to 0, start array bracket, then console.log space hashtag .repeat, and then bracket 4 times, and then end with semicolon, else, start array bracket, console.log bracket, copy, I'll just copy this hashtag space, and then .repeat 4, and then end with semicolon, and then check. So this array bracket closes down here, this closes here, this closes here, and then run. Okay, so now I'll break down the code. I'll just start the comment section below, so slash star and then star slash to close, and then we'll just take this code, we'll copy it and paste it down here, and then we'll write comments and explain it line by line. So what I first did, these two lines up here are essentially variables. We first set 2 variables with the basic pattern space and hashtag and space, so that we can reference these variables later below. Let's move on to our next line, which is for bracket let I equals to 0, semicolon, I less than 8, semicolon, I plus plus bracket. So for this line, we're essentially creating a for loop statement. So I'm just gonna write out the syntax again. So for it has three portions. The first portion is the starting value, semicolon, and then the second portion is the condition for the loop to stop, and then the third portion is the adjustment per iteration, and then close with bracket. So this creates a looping function where I will increase by 1 for each loop until there are a total of until there are a total of 8 iterations. So this will create essentially 8 of those rows. And then we'll move on to the next line, which is if I is divisible by 2 strictly equals to 0, then we will execute console.log space hashtag dot repeat 4, else we will execute console.log hashtag space dot repeat 4. So to review, our if syntax is if bracket check if condition is met bracket, then do this if condition is met. Otherwise do this if condition above is not met. If bracket I remainder operator 2 equals to 0, this means if I number is divisible by 2 with a remainder 0, we will execute the following function, which is this one here. So if this condition is met, we will execute this. Because I will increase, so when I say I, I'm referring to this here. So because I will increase sequentially as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 until, well, it will complete its sequence because we set our condition here, I is less than 8, and 7 will be, it will run up to 7 because 7 is less than 8, and it will stop there because it won't run the iteration when it's 8, because at 8 is not less than 8. So it will run from 0 to 7, and the reason why we increase by 1 is because in our third part of the syntax is I++. So the sequence will look like that: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and only every second number is divisible by 2 where the remainder is 0, aka no leftovers. So for example, e.g. 2 divided by 2 equals to 1, and the remainder is 0. Now let's explain the dot repeat function. So dot repeat, the syntax for it is period repeat and then bracket, and then within that bracket is the how many times you want it to be repeated. So whatever you attach dot repeat, essentially repeat will repeat that that item that you attached it to. So we took variable space hashtag up here, so space hashtag, and then we attached dot repeat to it. We took variable hashtag and repeated it 4 times. So it looks like this. So our we set up the variable up here, space hashtag, to be space and hashtag. So I'll just copy this. So we took that and then we multiplied it 4 times. So then it looks like Control C, copy 1, 2, 3, 4. So we essentially took that string and we multiplied it 4 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 8 characters. And then for the second line, console.log hashtag space dot repeat 4. That's essentially doing the same thing, but now it's referencing the second variable. So let me type that out. We took variable hashtag space and repeated it 4 times. So we took this x4 equals to, so hashtag space 1, 2, 3, 4. So we printed it out 4 times. And then because this has 2 characters, there's in total 8 characters. I less than 8, this will set the condition so that it will create 8 rows. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then repeat 4 will create 8 characters across. And we use 4 because in our variables here, in our string, there's actually 2 characters per variable. So 2 times 4 equals to 8. So dot repeat will create the 8 characters across. NANI? To help visualize the second solution or the second code, I've broken it down in Excel to show what each part does. So here is the code for the second solution. And then down here are each part of the code broken down. So in column B is our iterations. Column C is the starting I value for each iteration. Column D is our condition, which is the second portion of our syntax here. Column E, I remainder operator 2 equals to 0 is the portion of the code here where our if statement within the for statement, and then console.log space hashtag. So this refers to our variable that we set up here, which is space and hashtag. And then dot repeat is here where we attach dot repeat to our variable space hashtag. So this represents our first segment. If the condition is met, then we will execute the space hashtag. We will execute this segment. Otherwise, so then else console.log represents the last half of our if statement here. So if it does not meet this condition, the I remainder operator 2 equals to 0, then this second portion, this second segment of the code will be executed. So column J column J hashtag space refers to our variable that we set up here, where the string is hashtag space. So yeah, and then column K is dot repeat. So that just represents this line here. Dot repeat is attached to our hashtag space variable, and then I++ represents the last part of our for syntax. So I will increase by 1 after each iteration. And then column N is just to show the final result of each iteration. Sorry, there's actually a typo on my Excel. I should probably move this up. There's no, so the first iteration, not starting at 0. So the first iteration, the starting value of I is 0, because up here we said let I equals to 0, so that's why our starting value is 0. And because 0 is less than our condition of 8, then yes, we will continue looping. So so now we move on to our first segment of the code. Is 0 divisible by 2 equals to 0? Because 0 divided by 2 equals to undefined, which is JavaScript reads it as 0. The remainder is 0. Therefore, the first segment will execute. It will execute the variable where console.log will print the variable space hashtag, which is this one here, that contains the string value of space hashtag. So it will print that, and then because we have dot repeat 4 times, it will print that 4 times. So by printing it 4 times, it will have 8 characters, because 2 characters times 4 times equals to 8 characters in total. And because our first segment is already executed, it will ignore the else statement, which is the second portion here. It'll ignore that, and then the result will be space hashtag space hashtag space hashtag space hashtag. So right now on the screen it shows underscore, but like it's kind of hard to see space, so that's why I just put hashtag just to kind of show that's where the space should be. Yeah, so after this iteration is completed, the last portion of the for syntax is I++. So this here is just taking our starting I value and then increasing it by 1. So let's move on to the second line. In our second line, now I has increased to 1, and the starting value of I in the second iteration is just the ending value from our first iteration. So now that it's 1, compared to our condition, 1 is less than 8, therefore yes, continue looping. And because 1 divided by 2, the remainder is not 0, therefore we will not execute this first segment, and then we will move directly to the else statement. So because the first segment is not executed, then we will execute the second segment, which is hashtag space, which is this one here, hashtag space, which refers to our variable up here, hashtag space, and then because we put dot repeat 4 times, we will print that string 4 times. So 4 times 2 equals to 8, so there's 8 characters here. And then the ending result of our second iteration is hashtag space, hashtag space, hashtag space, hashtag space. And then if we move all the way to the bottom, where our starting value of I finally goes up to, finally increases to 8, because 8 is not less than 8, therefore the loop stops here. The loop stops here. And as we can see, the ending result is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 8 rows, and for each row there's 8 characters across. This brings me to the end of the video. If you guys did find the video useful, because the video did take time and effort to create, I would appreciate if you guys could give it a like. And if there's something that you did not like or did like, let me know in the comments below so I can use your feedback for future videos. And if you do want to tune in for future videos that you might find useful, feel free to subscribe. So thank you again for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.